"Will this tell me everything?" she asked, her voice tinged with both hope and fear. "Not everything," the man replied, "but it will show you the truth. About the Genesis Protocol, about why you were created, and about the future that awaits us if we don't stop them." Alita nodded, determined. She inserted the core into a nearby terminal, her cybernetic interface engaging as the screen flickered to life. The data flooded her senses, the information pouring into her mind faster than she could process it. The images and text danced before her eyes, fragments of a grand design, scattered memories from a past she had never known. Genesis was never meant to be a salvation project, the text read. It was an evolution, a weapon designed to shape the next phase of humanity's existence. The catalyst must be activated. Only then can the future of the human race be rewritten. Her fingers tightened around the data core and she felt a surge of anger rise within her. The catalyst. The word echoed in her mind, and for the first time, she began to understand the full scope of the protocol. She wasn't just part of a project. She was the key to its success. The catalyst was her existence was the trigger that would initiate the rebirth of the human race, whether she willed it or not. The screen shifted again, displaying images of a world torn apart by conflict. Cities in ruins, flesh and metal intertwined in ways that were grotesque. Soldiers, not unlike those who had been chasing them, marching in formation, their faces obscured by the glowing red of their cybernetic implants. "What is this?" Alita whispered, horrified by the images. The man's voice trembled as he spoke. "This is what they hope to create. A world where the strong survive and the weak are eliminated. It's a world that will be controlled by the Genesis Protocol. And you, Alita, are at the center of it." Alita's stomach twisted with dread. She could feel the weight of her own existence pressing down on her. She had always thought of herself as a protector, a warrior who fought for the innocent. But now she was part of something much larger. Something far darker than she could have ever imagined. She was the weapon, the key, the catalyst. She was the harbinger of the new world. The unexpected arrival. The man's warning came too late. Alita barely had time to react before the doors to the chamber slammed open with a deafening crash. A group of heavily armored soldiers flooded into the room, their weapons drawn, their eyes glowing with an unnerving, soulless light. "Alita," one of the soldiers called out, his voice mechanical, almost robotic. "You have violated the sanctity of the Genesis Project. Surrender now and you will be spared." Alita's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. Her hands ignited with the familiar hum of energy as her weapon systems came online. The soldier's words barely registered in her mind. There was no surrender. Not now. Not ever. "Get ready," the man whispered, stepping back into the shadows. "They won't stop until they have you, and they won't hesitate to destroy everything in their path." Alita's eyes locked onto the soldiers, her mind racing with strategy. She had fought countless battles, but this was different. These soldiers weren't just mindless drones. They were part of the Genesis Project. They had been created for a singular purpose, to ensure that the protocol was completed, and she was the last obstacle standing in their way. Without warning, the soldiers surged forward, their weapons raising to fire. Alita moved with lightning speed, dodging the blasts, her movements fluid and precise. She leapt into the air, twisting mid-slight, her arm blades extending as she descended onto one of the soldiers. The force of the impact sent him crashing to the ground, his body sparking as his system short-circuited. The rest of the soldiers didn't hesitate. They opened fire again, but Alita was already on the move. Her combat skills were honed to perfection, each strike landing with deadly accuracy. She twisted, spun, and disarmed her attackers, using their own momentum against them. Her body was a blur of motion, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to react faster than the human eye could follow. Yet despite her speed and skill, there were too many of them. They kept coming, relentless, each one more determined than the last. Alita's mind raced as she calculated her next move. She couldn't fight them all. Not here, not like this. The chamber was too small and the soldiers were too well equipped. She needed to find a way out, and fast. Escape to the surface. The man stepped forward, his hand glowing as he activated a hidden control panel on the wall. A large door slid open, revealing a narrow escape tunnel. "Go!" he shouted, his voice urgent. "I'll hold them off as long as I can." Alita hesitated for a moment, but then she nodded. She wasn't about to waste time. She had learned enough to understand the gravity of the situation. The Genesis Protocol was no longer just a mystery. It was a ticking time bomb, and she was the fuse. She darted into the tunnel, her enhanced senses guiding her through the darkness. The man's voice echoed in her mind as she moved. "You're the only one who can stop it, Alita. Don't let them use you." She pushed herself harder, faster, knowing that the future of humanity and her own existence depended on her next move. As Alita raced through the tunnels, the sounds of battle faded behind her. The deeper she went, the closer she came to understanding the role she had been born to play. But the question remained, would she be the one to destroy the protocol, or would she too become a part of its dark and twisted legacy? Alita's footsteps echoed down the dimly lit corridor, each stride heavier than the last. The tunnel she sprinted through stretched endlessly before her, the flickering lights above casting unsettling shadows against the walls. Behind her, the sounds of the soldiers' pursuit grew faint, but she knew they were closing in. There was no time to waste, no time to dwell on the horrors she had just uncovered. The Genesis Protocol wasn't just a relic of the past, it was the blueprint for the future. And her place in it was something she couldn't yet fully comprehend. Her heart raced as she moved deeper into the bowels of the hidden facility. The air grew colder the further she traveled, the hum of machinery growing louder with every step. It wasn't just the sounds of an old facility, it was something more. A pulse, a rhythm, almost as if the very walls of the place were alive. The Genesis Protocol wasn't a project. It was a living organism, growing, evolving, just like her. Her mind flickered back to the man, the one who had helped her uncover the secrets of the Genesis Protocol. His face was filled with regret, and for good reason. He had been a part of something so monumental, so dangerous, that it had consumed him. He had tried to stop it, tried to pull back from the precipice, but it was clear that Alita was now too far gone to turn back. Alita stopped for a moment, her hand resting against the cool metal of the tunnel's wall. She could feel the weight of the data she had absorbed, the burden of the knowledge. The Genesis Protocol had always been about control, about resetting humanity's future. But what did that future hold? Would she too be a pawn in someone else's twisted vision? Or could she rewrite the rules, reclaim her identity, and destroy the very force that sought to shape the world? A low rumble echoed through the passage. Her enhanced vision flickered for a second, sensing movement ahead. She wasn't alone anymore. The soldiers weren't far behind, and she needed to keep moving. A new ally. As she rounded a corner, she found herself in a vast underground chamber. The sheer scale of the room was overwhelming, with towering columns of machinery that seemed to stretch into the darkness. Holographic displays flashed across the walls, casting eerie glows across the space. At the far end of the chamber, a large platform stood, suspended above a glowing, pulsating core, a massive energy source, its light flickering like the heartbeat of the protocol itself. Alita instinctively crouched, her sensors alert. Her breathing slowed as she scanned the area. The soldiers hadn't caught up yet, but something in the air told her this was no place for a fight. She had to be careful. She stepped forward, cautiously making her way toward the platform. As she did, her hand brushed against a control panel embedded in the floor. It hummed to life under her touch, and a series of holographic projections erupted from the walls, displaying images of what she recognized as the Genesis Protocol's core. There were diagrams of advanced technology, blueprints of a new kind of soldier, and what appeared to be designs for a new civilization. But something stood out among the projections, a symbol, a marking, an ancient logo that looked almost like a seal. It was familiar. Alita's fingers hovered over it, and the image flickered, just as she had seen it in her memories from before. The memories that still eluded her. The pieces of her past that she couldn't fully grasp, but somehow knew were connected to the protocol. "Aha!" A voice broke through the silence. "I see you've made it this far." Alita spun on her heels, her arm blades extending with a hiss of energy. Standing in the doorway, partially obscured by the shadows, was a figure. An unexpected ally. His features were masked by a dark cloak, but there was something about him that felt different from the soldiers she had encountered. "I wasn't sure you'd come," the figure continued, stepping into the light. His face was familiar but scarred, marked by the same battle-worn look as the man who had helped her in the archives. "Who are you?" Alita demanded, narrowing her eyes. "And why should I trust you?" The man smirked, unperturbed by her readiness for a fight. "I understand your caution, but I'm not here to hurt you, Alita. In fact, I'm here to help you." Alita didn't lower her guard. "Help me? I don't need anyone's help. Not anymore." "I think you do," the man replied, "because what you're standing in front of is far more dangerous than anything you've encountered before." He motioned toward the platform, where the pulsating core continued to glow ominously. "This is the heart of the Genesis Protocol," the man explained. "But it's not just about controlling the evolution of humanity. It's about power. Absolute control over everything. And you—" He paused, his gaze locking onto Alita's. "You're the key to it." The words hung heavy in the air. Alita's stomach churned, but she refused to show weakness. "If I'm the key," she said through gritted teeth, "then I'll destroy it." The man shook his head. "You don't understand. You can't destroy it. Not without destroying yourself in the process. The Genesis Protocol is tied to you, Alita. You are its genesis, the catalyst." A flash of memory, a face she didn't recognize but felt an inexplicable connection to, flickered across her mind. She struggled to grasp it, but it was fleeting as always. "The catalyst," she murmured, the words tumbling from her lips like a revelation. "I've heard that term before. You are the catalyst," the man said softly, almost in awe. "Without you, the protocol cannot be completed. But don't you see? You were never meant to just start it. You were meant to end it." Alita took a step back, her mind reeling. The weight of his words sank in, but she wouldn't accept it. She wasn't a puppet. She was her own person. She had fought too hard for her own freedom to be a part of some twisted design. "I don't believe you," she said firmly. "There has to be another way." "There is," the man agreed. "But it's not a simple choice. You have to decide. Will you embrace what you were born to be, or will you fight against it? A flicker of movement caught Alita's eye. A soldier, no, two, emerged from the shadows, their weapons raised. Alita was ready for a fight, but the man stopped her with a raised hand. "Don't," he warned. "These aren't the enemies you need to fight right now. They're part of the Genesis Project too, but their purpose is to protect you, to ensure the protocol is completed. If they're here, it means something has changed." Alita's eyes narrowed as she processed his words. These soldiers weren't her enemies, not in the traditional sense, but that didn't make them her allies either. They were part of the same system, part of the same plan that had been set into motion long before her. The winds of Iron City had shifted. The once blistering streets, where the echoes of mechanical chaos had screamed day and night, now hummed with the promise of change. It had been over a year since Alita's final battle with Nova. The city, once a barren wasteland of violence, had started to rebuild. Streets were being paved, old ruins repurposed into makeshift homes, and the underworld of the city had reluctantly accepted the changes, though not without resistance. But Alita could sense it, the feeling of something hidden beneath the surface, a restlessness, a shadow that would not be quelled. As much as the city was trying to reclaim its humanity, she knew the peace was only temporary. The war had not truly ended, it had only evolved. She stood atop one of the city's newly constructed towers, overlooking the sprawling expanse below. The lights from the newly built sections of Iron City glowed like stars, mingling with the faded remnants of older, crumbling areas. Yet in the distance there remained the ever-present silhouette of Zalem, where the floating city had once towered as a symbol of technological oppression. It was gone, obliterated in the wake of Nova's defeat, but its influence was still felt. Alita's enhanced vision scanned the horizon. Her mind was elsewhere, though. Far beyond the visible skyline of Iron City, her cybernetic senses buzzed, probing the air, sensing signals, picking up on frequencies. It wasn't just the city that was in motion. Something else, something deeper was stirring. A faint hum, barely perceptible, reached her ears. But it was enough to spark the hunger for answers within her. She turned away from the edge of the tower, her long black hair flowing behind her, and made her way down the staircase that spiraled inward. As she descended, her thoughts wandered to the strange event that had occurred days earlier. The storm. The voice. Appian. Alita. The voice had whispered through the storm that had rolled into Iron City like an ominous omen. She'd heard it clearly, despite the roar of wind and the thunder that shattered the sky. It wasn't just a hallucination or a trick of her mind. It was real, and it called her by name, like a message meant solely for her. But who could have known her? After all, Zalem had fallen, and Nova was no more. The voice had stirred something deep inside her, a part of her soul that had been dormant for far too long. She needed answers. The hidden path. Alita's journey led her beneath the surface of Iron City to places few had ever seen. The city was not just built on the surface, but sprawled into the depths below, where forgotten secrets lay buried. She had heard whispers from some of the city's old residents, stories of hidden labs and ancient technology lost to time. Those who knew where to look still referred to it as the Genesis Project. At first, she thought it was another myth, a fragment of the past people used to explain the inexplicable. But as she dug deeper, she began to see the patterns emerge. Clues. Her body, her very existence, was tied to something much larger than the collapse of Zalem. Her creation had not been the end. No, it had only been the beginning. Her destination was a part of Iron City long forgotten by most, the underground labs of the old military factions that had once ruled the city from the shadows. It was there, beneath layers of debris and overgrown wires, that Alita discovered the hidden entryway. The thick metal door, half buried under the remnants of concrete, had once been sealed off. Now it opened to her effortlessly as her enhanced strength easily manipulated the ancient locks. A faint hum filled the air as she stepped inside, her footsteps echoing through the abandoned corridors. The laboratory was vast, stretching far beyond the limits of the city she knew. Advanced machinery, dormant for years, lined the walls. Holographic displays flickered in and out of existence, as if they were waking from a long slumber. The entire facility reeked of forgotten history. Technology abandoned long before Iron City had begun its rebuilding. Alita moved cautiously through the space, her eyes scanning the walls for any signs of life or danger. It wasn't long before she came across what she had been searching for. A terminal, cracked and covered in dust, yet still functional. She connected her neural interface to it, bypassing decades of security protocols with ease. The screen flickered to life. Genesis Protocol. Project Initiation, it read in cold, clinical text. Alita froze, her breath caught in her chest. The Genesis Protocol. She had heard rumors of it before in the shattered remnants of the Zalem archives, but she had never been able to piece together its true purpose. Now, in this forgotten corner of the city, the truth was beginning to emerge. She continued to read. Genesis was conceived as a final attempt to rewrite the course of human evolution. The protocol's objective was to create a new species, one that could survive the coming apocalypse and reshape the future of humanity. You, Alita, are the prototype, the first successful iteration of the Genesis plan. A chill ran down her spine as the reality began to set in. She wasn't merely a weapon created to fight Zalem's tyranny. She was part of a much larger design, part of a plan that had been in motion long before she had even been awakened. Alita's mind raced. She was a creation of a higher order, a part of something far beyond the scope of her previous battles. The Genesis Protocol wasn't just about survival. It was about rebirth. But who had made her? Who had decided that she, of all people, would be the key to this new world? Her questions only deepened as the terminal flickered again, revealing more data. To complete the Genesis Protocol, the last piece is required, the catalyst, a force that will trigger the rebirth of humanity. A new realization dawned on her. She wasn't just a weapon, she was a key. The key to something much more powerful, something far more dangerous. The mysterious visitor. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. Alita's enhanced senses immediately went on alert. She drew her arm blades with a swift motion, ready to defend herself. The figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, cloaked individual whose features were obscured by the dark fabric, but as they stepped closer, Alita could see the faint glow of cybernetic eyes peering through the darkness. Alita, the figure said, their voice familiar and cold. You should not have come here. Who are you? Alita demanded, her voice steady, yet tinged with suspicion. What do you know about the Genesis Protocol? The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, they stepped closer, revealing their face. It was a man, aged, with long silver hair and a scar that ran across his cheek. His body was mostly cybernetic, his limbs sleek and designed for strength. I am a remnant of what was once, the man finally said. I was there when the Genesis Protocol was first conceived. I helped design you, Alita. But it wasn't supposed to be like this. You were never meant to uncover this truth. Alita's heart raced. You helped create me? The man nodded slowly. I was one of the lead engineers on the Genesis project, but the plan, it became something I could no longer support. The power we were trying to wield, the revolution we were hoping to start, grew beyond our control. It became clear to me that what we were doing would bring nothing but chaos. Chaos? Alita repeated, her mind reeling. I fought for peace, for freedom, but you're saying that everything I've fought for was part of this? The man's eyes softened. I see now that you were the only one who could stop it, the only one who could change the course of the future. But there are others who have followed the old path, and they will come for you, Alita. They will stop at nothing to complete the Genesis protocol, the shadow of the revolution. Alita didn't have time to process everything. She had only just begun to unravel the truth of her existence when the ground beneath her feet trembled. The distant hum of machinery grew louder, and an alarm blared throughout the lab. They've found us, the man whispered. They're coming. Alita's instincts kicked in. The Genesis protocol was no longer just an ancient project, it was an active force, and it was threatening to reshape everything she had worked for. The city, the people, the future. It all hung in the balance. She turned to the man, determination in her eyes. What's our next move? The man's gaze met hers, and for the first time, she saw a hint of fear in his eyes. There's a place where we can hide, he said. But the real question is, Alita, will you choose to protect the future, or will you destroy it? Before she could answer, the doors to the lab burst open, and a group of heavily armed cybernetic soldiers stormed in. The battle for the future was about to begin. Alita stood motionless in the abandoned lab, her mind trying to process the enormity of the discovery she had just unearthed. The Genesis Protocol. This was the secret that had been buried under layers of time, of history, and of technological advancements. It was the blueprint of her existence, the reason she had been created. Yet, it was more than just her origin. It was the beginning of something far greater and far more dangerous. The man who had revealed himself as a key figure in the Genesis project remained still, his eyes focused on the darkened corridors, clearly aware of the oncoming threat. Alita could hear the approaching footsteps, the clinking of metal as the soldiers marched closer. She didn't need to be told twice. They were after her. After the knowledge she had just uncovered. The Genesis Protocol was not just an ancient relic. It was alive, it was active, and there were those who would stop at nothing to see it completed. Who are they? Alita asked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. The man's face was a map of conflict, a struggle between regret and determination. They are part of the old guard, the ones who believe the Genesis Protocol is the only hope for humanity. They were the architects of this project, and they won't let anyone, least of all you, stand in their way. Are you telling me they want to bring the world to its knees? Alita's tone sharpened, her fists tightening at her sides, the hum of her weapon systems already responding to her heightened emotions. It's more than that, the man said gravely. They see the protocol as the only way to reset humanity's evolution, a way to free us from the shackles of a failing system. But the cost is unimaginable. Alita's eyes narrowed. The cost of what? Of creating a new world, a new order, a world where those who are chosen by the Genesis Project will rule, and the rest will be discarded. His voice was thick with regret. "I thought I could stop it, but now you're the only one who can." Before she could respond, a loud crash echoed through the corridor, followed by the sound of heavy boots. The soldiers were almost upon them. There was no time to hesitate. "Stay close," the man said, stepping toward a nearby wall. With a fluid motion, he swiped his hand across a panel embedded in the stone. A hidden door slid open, revealing a narrow passage leading further into the heart of the facility. Alita hesitated for a moment, her gaze lingering on the terminal she had just unlocked. She could feel the pull of the data, the urge to continue sifting through the secrets it contained. But the sound of the soldiers' approach was growing louder, more insistent. She knew there was no choice but to move. Without another word, she followed the man through the narrow tunnel, the door sliding shut behind them. The passage was dark, only dimly lit by flickering overhead lights. The air felt thick with the weight of history, and every step she took seemed to draw her deeper into the web of the Genesis Protocol. The passage led them down several levels, each more remote and isolated than the last. Alita could feel the weight of the ancient technology surrounding her, buried deep beneath Iron City. This was no ordinary facility. It had been constructed long before Zalem fell, long before Iron City had even begun to take shape. The man led her to a large chamber, its walls lined with towering shelves filled with data cores, archives, and blueprints. Everything in this room was a relic from a past that had been erased from history. "This is the heart of the Genesis Project," the man explained. "These are the original archives, where the protocol was first conceived. The information here is volatile. It holds the key to everything." Alita's fingers brushed over the shelves, her mind racing. The data cores were covered in dust, untouched for years. She pulled one from the shelf, examining it. It was old, its surface cracked, worn from time, but the technology it contained was far beyond anything she had ever seen. She could feel the hum of energy inside it, the promise of knowledge.